I met Anne Manson. Oh, it must have been the early 90s. I think she came to an opera of mine in London, and at that point she was music director of a small opera company called Mecklenburg Opera, which was really quite high. I'm trying to remember what it did. It did some interesting premiere by a major composer that hadn't been done. I think it was Kurt Weill or somebody like that. I can't remember. Anyway, they were really very high profile at that time, and so they ended up commissioning an evening of operas based on folk tales, and there were supposed to be three of us, and what with one thing and another, mine was the only one that got finished. One piece was performed incomplete, and one of them just fell away. And in fact, no, it wasn't. They had to substitute a piece by another composer at the last minute. So mine was the only survivor, and that was premiered in '96. But just before rehearsal started, Anne got another job. And so she never conducted it, having commissioned it. Yeah. And so she sort of, I'd always ribbed her and sort of said, well, you need to make amends. We need to, we haven't worked together. This is ridiculous. And so she then found out about this Chinese themed piece of mine, which she was putting into another concert. And then she couldn't do that concert. So then she sort of said, well, I really want, to do a new piece by you. So I said, well, that'd be fantastic. Let's work together again. So this is the piece. And of course, the pandemic came. So that concert went south. And then because of scheduling and everything, she's actually not conducting this performance of it. So thank you, Anne. But I'm beginning to think we're kind of, are we bad news for each other? So that's the connection. So that's how I got to have a piece done by the orchestra 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Some tale.
No, it's really ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like a jinx.
So when a composer is commissioned to write a piece, what's involved? Are there any specific guidelines the composer needs to follow? And if you want to use this situation and this commission as an example?
No, well, I mean, yes. I mean, I think any commission is dependent on who's commissioning it and what they have. So this one was very specific. This one was I could have more than strings, but I could have a scoring that was kind of commensurate with an early Mozart or an early Haydn symphony. So before clarinets really, or anything like that. So it literally is 2 oboes, 2 horns, and a bassoon, plus the string section. And the string numbers were very specific. I think it was 5, 4, 3, 3. I can't remember. Sorry, it's been a while. But,
it's okay. It's in the score. I can refer to that.
Yes, no, I have to look up. I've got the score up somewhere actually, but I've forgotten. Anyway, all I know is that I kind of wrote to them and said, look, I said, are you absolutely religious about the 5, 4, 4, whatever it was? I said, because I'd quite like to write. Have one passage where the violins actually all 9 violin players play independently. And obviously, I don't want to do that if you might kind of think, oh, we're not sure we can guarantee that all the time. So they said, no, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. So I did that. But no, it's always very specific. I think when you get a commission, and in fact, the more specific it is, the more useful it is. To be honest, I have written pieces. Usually, I write them for myself, and then raise the money for them, and they do get put on eventually, where I kind of have a free rein, but usually commissions come with some sort of, quite stringent guideline, I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it? If you write for a wind quintet, you're going to sort of say, can I have 3 trombones? And they're going to go, no.
That would be interesting.
It would, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's just sort of, no, it's a wind quintet, just grow up.
So after those initial kind of discussions and just deciding what it's going to look like, how collaborative is that after that point?
It's not particularly collaborative. I was, I was sort of, as I said, I was given the scoring. I was given sort of 12, 13-minute time, duration, and then not particularly. I mean, I did. Anne was in London, so I did share when I was there sketches and ideas and things, and then she was the first to see the score, and she wrote back with some comments and stuff. So I mean, it's always nice to have that, because I mean, you're very much in limbo, thinking, what have I done? What is this? Kind of, is this a load of old rubbish? I mean, you just sort of, you come out of the other side and think, I need some perspective on this from somebody. So so yes, in the fact that I kind of know Anne for many years, it was very nice that she was around and sort of bouncing ideas back off the back and stuff.
Do you ever need to kind of touch base with some of the musicians, especially, I know not in this case, but if you have some pieces where there's a soloist?
Oh, particularly, yes, no, absolutely, yes. I mean, I sort of didn't with this piece simply because I had been so blown away when they did this piece of mine 7 years ago, which would, it was literally an existing old piece that they did, and it was such an amazing performance. It was far better than any performance of it that I'd had thus far. So I kind of thought, oh my God, they've got the string section, they seem to want to play anything, it's because it was not an easy piece particularly, and they played it sort of fantastically well. So I kind of figured, well, I can kind of can remember what the string writing was like, and it was nice to have the little sort of added, like a kind of maraschino cherry on top, having the wind and the very small wind additions. And I mean, I wrote an extensive program note about it, which you might have seen. And it was kind of strange, because it didn't sort of settle into any particular kind of form or idea for a long time, which was a bit sort of scary at a couple of points. I thought, why is this not happening? But it was quite liberating when I actually decided to sort of make it a kind of free for all, and I'm now actually discussing I'm just starting to discuss the piece with Julian Pellicano, who's asking me all these kind of questions about sort of structure and pitch series and things, and I'm thinking, gosh, I don't write like that particularly, and it's quite interesting to be kind of made to think about things like that. I'm quite what's the word, intuitive when I write. I don't tend to kind of construct, though as an opera composer I think one does have or one should have, and hopefully I do, a good sense of architecture, of sort of tension and release, and everything I write has got a kind of drama to it. That's just me. I think that's there are some composers that have that, and some that do something else, and that's just it. But everything I write, I tend to think, it's a kind of narrative. It's like storytelling. It's not necessarily an obvious story, or a story that's even conscious. It's a question of sort of timing, and so you do kind of look at it like I always look at it, for me, like a piece of architecture.
Yeah, you've provided fantastic program notes, and so I'm wondering if you want to kind of maybe walk us through that, or kind of go through that architecture, just to kind of walk us through the program.
Oh, sure.
Notes.
Well, I mean, the as you've read the program note, so I mean, it was just funny because I had all these kind of disparate sketches, and all these kind of things. I'm thinking, gosh, these add up. It's like 5 different pieces, and I kind of couldn't quite. I was trying to kind of bend them into each other and do all this stuff, and then I was kind of vegging out one weekend, sort of must have been 2019. I was writing it. Yes, gosh, might as well be 1919, mustn't it? It's so long ago.
Lots has happened.
I know.
Yeah.
And anyway, there was I'm a huge kind of movie buff. I just love the movies, and particularly if it's kind of crackly black and white and got subtitles, I love the movies. So they were showing this 1960 film called A Bout de Souffle, or Breathless, as it's known in English. Have you seen it? I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I haven't.
Oh, right.
I'll have it on my list.
It's kind of interesting because it's by this experimental French director, Jean-Luc Godard, and it's like a precursor of all the kind of really sort of consciously cool gangster flicks that came later in the 70s and 80s. And now what he did technically in that film has become kind of, you know, the lingua franca. He pioneered this sort of what they then called jump cuts, which was when you sort of take the image and you splice it so that it sort of literally jumps. Quite often it's of the same thing, but it sort of jumps. And he also used handheld camera, so it's sort of wobbly. It looks kind of sort of homemade, and that was really controversial for 1960. I mean, we've seen it endlessly now in Tarantino and all that stuff. Anyway, so I kind of thought, oh, that's quite a cool idea, a sort of jump cut. And also there's another term called a smash cut, where you literally go without any segue into something completely different. So in a way, my piece probably should be called Smash Cuts, but I just didn't like that title. I thought Jump Cuts was more evocative. So yes, now I have a friend who's a filmmaker who sort of said, it's not really right. So I said, it's poetic, leave me alone.
Creative license.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So that's kind of how the piece came about. So I was like assembling a collage. So there are all these little disparate moments. There's a moment that sounds a bit like a sort of old folk tune, and I didn't consciously quote anything. I think I just sort of made up something in a slightly folky folk tune style. And there's a sort of some odd little kind of half-hearted processions, and it opens with a big sort of horn call that sounds quite outdoorsy, and it's immediately mirrored by the second horn playing it all muted, so it sounds like it's coming from another dimension. And somehow it sort of all links up. And in fact, what does happen towards the end is it actually, having worked at it, it does actually coalesce into a sort of slightly unruly procession. And it starts with all of that's where all the 9 violins come in, and they play this kind of, it's like a big melodic idea, but they play it all one by one, but out of sync and playing it against each other. So it's a sort of unholy row. And then gradually it sinks together, and then it ends up with all the violins playing the whole thing. And what I did in the score was I actually asked if it were possible for when the soloists start playing one by one, if they could actually all stand up and play it, and then remain standing till the end of the piece. So it actually ends up like a big sort of violin sort of moment. I don't know how practical that will be. You know, sometimes orchestral musicians get a bit sort of stroppy when they're asked to do things like that. They want to get paid extra or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, we'll have to, doubling fees.
yes, that kind of thing. So I'm hoping see if it works. I'm hoping to see that will work. You know, that will do it. And then yes, once that tune, it's not really a tune. I think it's derived from other bits, but it does coalesce into a big sort of paragraph. Once that sort of happened, I remember sort of I finished writing the piece at this lovely artists retreat, which I'd been invited to in Florida, called the Hermitage Arts Retreat, and it's sort of 2 causeways out. And so I had a hut that was literally on the beach where the turtles would come up and bury their eggs and all this stuff. And I remember arriving there in the dead of winter in 2019, and you know, getting off and the lady I know there sort of said, you know, what are you gonna, what's on the cards for you? Or you have something you want to write and everything. So I said, well, look, I said, I've got this orchestral piece to finish. I said, and basically it needs a miracle. So I'm hoping that the beach and the sea and all that is going to provide a miracle. And it was lovely because within 48 hours I'd finished the piece. It sort of sat down on the beach, you know, because it was so wonderful to be on a warm beach in November or December or whenever it was, and it sort of all kind of, you know, popped into place. So,
what do you think it was that allowed that to happen so quickly once you got there?
Yes, well, I think the thing was, I think I was kind of, I possibly had been trying too hard. You know what it's like when you sort of try too hard, and then you go to sleep and you dream the answer quite something. Sometimes I think it was an equivalent of that, to be honest.
Yeah, or
So,
going for a walk. I suddenly
yes,
can
yes, no,
work
it's
through a lot of
true.
the things that I've been
Yes,
trying
yes,
to
go for a
figure
walk
out.
and switch off. Yes, and not think about
Yeah,
it. I think,
yeah.
yes. So that's sort of that's the lack of method in my madness, if you like. It's kind of. And every piece is different, and every time I start a new piece, I kind of look at an older score of mine and think, how the hell did I do that? No idea. How did I start this? No idea. It's awful. It's like sort of baby steps. You're thinking, I can't do this at all. This is ridiculous. I'm in the wrong profession. Yes.
So how do you approach that if each piece is going to be a different way of starting and approaching the piece? How do you know when you're ready to kind of jump in and you're in the right direction with it?
You sort of don't really. What I do know from experience, if I start to sort of force it and write down stuff too quickly, it sort of comes out not quite cooked. It's like taking a cake out of the oven too early. So I kind of know, because I don't sit down and write every day. I kind of write when it suits, and I have fallow periods. I'm having a large fallow period now, and I get sort of ideas and things, and I kind of think, no, it's not ready to write yet, and I kind of sort of have a kind of, I guess that I've been doing it long enough. I've got a kind of instinct to sort of think, okay, let it alone, And then people say to me, well, aren't you scared you're going to kind of forget it? And I sort of say, well, if I forget it, it probably wasn't worth keeping, But I do. I mean, I have a sketchbook, and I sort of scribble the odd little prompt down. But particularly with sort of writing opera and stuff, which is sort of where I get, I think, all the constructing and the drama comes from. It's actually very interesting because it's in an opera, not so much an orchestral piece. In an opera, it's much more crucial to get the sort of pacing and the argument right, and the notes kind of fall into place themselves if you just sort of leave it. If you start to get sort of in love with the notes and think, oh, but this is such a lovely moment, I must put this in somewhere, then you sort of you can kill the momentum of an opera stone dead. And so I'm sure that affects how I write other pieces in other modes. As I said, there's always some kind of a direction or a narrative going on in my head, even if it's not explicit.
Are you planning on attending some of the MCO rehearsals?
Well, I hope so. Yes, very much so. Yes, because I don't know Julian. So he's Julian 1, by the way. I'm Julian 2. I sorted that out. Yes.
Noted.
Always good to butter up your conductor, I always think.
Yeah, and so when you are at a rehearsal.
Sorry?
Yeah, how involved do you like to be when the ensemble is rehearsing your piece? So when you're present at the rehearsal?
Oh, well, I think one keeps out of the way unless the conductor asks you, basically. And usually conductors, are very, very nice and but yeah, I mean, yes, you kind of, Julian said, look, come to the I don't mind if you come to the first rehearsal. I said, oh, are you sure? So I said, well, fine. I said, it's actually very useful for me, because I mean, the other funny thing about orchestral rehearsals with an opera is different, because it tends to happen over a much longer time. But orchestral rehearsals, it's sort of in and out, isn't it? You're kind of, there's a couple of rehearsals and boom, you're on, and that's it. And it's so awful when players or conductors kind of turn to me and say, "Is that what you want?"
Yeah.
And I'm going,
I can imagine that's difficult.
I haven't a clue. Sorry, these were lots of little dots on a page, and now I'm hearing something for the first time, and just let me kind of decide.
So what would that be different from a premiere compared to a piece that has been performed a few times?
Yes, I suppose it would be. Yes, most definitely, because I mean, I've got the sort of practical or oral image in my head. Of course, I've got an oral image in my head for this, because I can sort of hear what I envisaged. But sometimes reality, is different. I have to confess, it's sort of usually a bit less so as I'm getting older. I'm getting a bit used to I'm sort of much more in control of what I put on the page. When I was young, I would sort of think, oh, that'll be kind of, splat. It's like throwing paint at the wall, and then you kind of go into reality, you think, oh God, no.
And then there's some working with the musicians and the conductor.
Oh, hopefully, yes. No,
that's
always the fun part.
Together.
No, it's always the fun part. Yes.
Yeah. So it must be very exciting, obviously, for any composer to hear one of their pieces performed live, and especially at world premiere. So what are you most looking forward to when Jump Cuts is performed by the MCO in March? And what do you hope the audience will experience at the concert?
Well, I hope the audience will go with the concept. I'm hoping that they will kind of, I think I put on the program note that, basically, I don't have an explicit scenario, but there is one, there's one there somewhere. So I hope you kind of can make up your own and sort of go with it, because I think it's quite sort of visual, all the gestures and stuff. So I hope that's what the audience gets out of it. And it's always lovely to get comeback from audience, even, this kind of, even, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's always interesting, to see what people make of things. So it's nice, because one's starved for that, even before the pandemic, you sort of if people kind of say, oh, that was lovely, and that's it, you think, God, I've just got all that, and it's really nice when people kind of take the trouble to kind of go, oh, right, well, that's kind of that bit sounds like that bit, and that, It's always very helpful. It's always very helpful, and and it's difficult, but particularly when you're a contemporary composer. When you go and hear a piece by sort of Tchaikovsky or Shostakovich or Grieg or whoever, you kind of know, if you're, you sort of think, oh, that's Tchaikovsky, I know what Tchaikovsky sounds like, but with new pieces, with new composers and stuff, people don't know what your language is like normally. So if you sort of mess around with your own language, they kind of don't know what the norm is, and if that's a sort of unusual piece for you, or is that a typical piece, or anything. So that's always kind of an interesting thing. So yes, no, all kinds of feedback is great. It's always good to hear.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I think that's an invitation
for
our audiences to get in touch.
Yes, definitely. No, I think it's always very, very helpful. It's always very, very helpful and very useful. And because frankly, one doesn't really know what one's written until you hear it, and you think, oh, right, okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. It was really nice to meet you.
Not at all. It's lovely to meet you. I'm looking forward. I hope we meet in person when I come. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I'll see you at the rehearsal, I'm sure, and then a
terrific
concert.
Yeah. Terrific. Good.